So now we're going to talk a little bit about privacy and safety, and hopefully you had the chance to fill out the survey that I had for you on this because I'm interested in your thoughts, independent of my own, in answering these questions. And I think it's important to realize once again that everyone has different opinions on this. So my opinion is not by any stretch necessarily the final word. But I'll give you a few thoughts that you can just consider as you think about these things. There's all kinds of information that we can share on the internet, and it's varying levels of safety. Really, if you want to be completely safe, don't share anything on the internet. But once again, we're in an internet world. That's just kind of the way it is. So let me go through and just talk about some of the pros and cons of some different of these options. So names, I don't know if you can get away with not sharing your name on the internet, although I am very careful with my children's names that are minors. I use pseudonyms for them when I'm on Facebook so that only people that know my kids, they'll recognize them from the pseudonames, but people who don't know my kids won't know who I'm talking about. And that's just because I think, and we'll get to this later about reputation management, I think my children's reputation is one of the most sacred things about them, and they have the right to either mess up or enhance their own reputation when they get old enough. And I shouldn't be posting things about them right now on the internet that may never go away from the internet and may be embarrassing to them when they're older or anything like that. I just want their reputation to be their own making and not influenced by me necessarily. So I'm pretty careful with my kids' names on the internet, but I think you guys as teenagers, putting your name on the internet is probably fine, or as young adults, probably all right. Photos, there will be different opinions about that, and you should know that some parents will be very upset about you putting are asking kids to put their photos on the internet. I think most people feel like photos that are appropriate photos are okay. But if I have another slide that I'll show you some alternatives, if parents don't want you to put photos on the internet, you need to respect that privacy and that choice. If parents are careful about that, then you need to have alternative kinds of assignments for students. Age and birth date. Here's an interesting thought. Did you realize that your birth date is actually one of the most important private pieces of information about you, and that if I know where you were born and your birth date, I can figure out your social security number? And that's true. And con artists that are really good at that know how to do that. So because your birth date is it's a secure piece of information. When you go to verify credit card information, when you go to verify other kinds of things, you use your birth date. And so you, I think personally, need to be careful with your birth date. So my birth date on Facebook is actually January 1st of the year I was born. So it's funny because that's not my birth date, but on January 1st I get a bunch of happy birthdays, and I can tell who my real friends are because my real friends know what my birthday is, and everyone else wishes me happy birthday on January 1st. And that's what I use for anything on the internet, is I put January 1st, just because I don't want people to know my birth date. And if you know me in real life, you already know my birthday. So we're good. Address, I would be very careful about. You don't want, that's where you can get into things like there are some dangerous people out there. And while I think those cases of, child snatching or abductions or things like that, I think that's over, we hear about them in the news because they're rare. So I think it's over dramatized a little bit, but it is true and it does happen. And I think the address and your schedule, where you're going to be, when, is probably something you need to be careful about. The routes you take to walk from places to places. When I am out of town, I never post about being out of town because I don't want people to know that my wife and children are home alone. And in fact, there is a Twitter place called pleaserobme.com where it posts Twitter updates from people who are posting on Twitter about being on vacation. And it's basically a place to let thieves know who's not home right now, so you can go rob their house. So, be careful about that. Be considerate about your schedule. You don't want to necessarily let people know where you are all the time. Sometimes it can be okay, but just keep that in mind. The things that you like and dislike, your religion, your political preferences, the things you like, those kinds of things are typically probably going to be pretty safe, but I will say be considerate. You may not say something really controversial in a public place with lots of different people, but people say really controversial things on the internet all the time, and you can be offensive. You might be posting just an opinion, but remember that those reading your opinions may have different opinions. And so always when I post about politics or about religion, I do so recognizing that there will be people reading my updates who probably disagree with me, who maybe are going through a trial of their faith or have a different political persuasion, and I still want to say what I believe in. I believe in standing up for what I believe in, but I also believe in doing so in a very respectful way, being respectful of other people's opinions as well. So I just would give you that piece of opinion. And then you get into things like homework. How do you feel as a teacher about students talking about their homework on the internet? I mean, they talk about it outside of class. We call that sharing. We call that helping. It can be called cheating as well. And so you want to have a policy about that with your students, about what kinds of things they can share on the internet and with each other, and what kinds of things you don't want them to be sharing with each other. And then also realizing that they probably can be sharing more than you want them to be. So craft your assignments in a way that even if they are sharing with each other, it doesn't necessarily undermine the way you're able to assess and grade performance in the class. That you can form assignments in a way that sharing doesn't invalidate the assessment, if you know what I mean. Things like asking them to write things, and you get to know the writing of your students, and you can tell when they wrote something themselves. That's a lot more of a difficult kind of thing to get around than just swapping assignments or just swapping answers on a multiple choice test kind of a thing. So just something to think about, because it is pretty easy for people to share information about homework on the internet as well.